Likutei Torah, excuse me, Parshas Acharei, page Chavav, second column is Gimel. Okay, the last thing that Rabbi was explaining, that the three pillars that bring down Elokus into the world, Torah, Aveda, Gemilas, Chassadim. So he was explaining, excuse me, no, there's nothing to do with that. So the Rebbe is explaining that it's Machshava, Dibur and Maisem, Bria Tzir Nasiyan. Tefillah is primarily Machshava because it's Kavana. Torah is Dibur, and then you have Maisem. So he explains that each one of these are the fuel for the flame. So even though like Machshava is more refined than Dibur, which is more refined than Maisa, so it's a mashal. No, that's not going to help. Thank you. He says you have wood, which is a very thick, coarse fire, big fire. Then you have a flame, which is a much more refined fire. So one has a mila, it's more refined. The other one has a mila, it's a bigger fire, and accomplishes much more. Okay? So he says, excuse me, each one has a mile, and therefore you need all three. So he says, in Elotais is Bi'er HaKosov. To explain another explanation of what the pasuk says. Ki Hashem Elokecha Eish Eichluhu. The pasuk says Hashem is a consuming fire. So therefore we have the mashal that in order to keep Hashem, who's the Eish Eichla, consuming fire down here in the world, so we have the mashal of physical fire that you need the fuel to keep it going. And he said this, Torah, Tefillah, Tzedakah, and so on. So he says, we need to understand first, just like fire does not grasp properly in the wick of the wood, is only when it's a fire that consumes. In order for a fire to be a real fire, it has to consume the fuel. The fire is consuming the fuel. And therefore, the fuel has to be something that the fire could consume. The whole chiddush by the burning bush, Madoy lo yever asna. Moshe Rabbeinu said the fire and it's not becoming consumed. This is not a natural fire, which means natural fire consumes the fuel. So when the fuel is more subject to be consumed, it's a better fire. The same way when we say Hashem Elokecha is Eish Eichluhu, we say is Ein Hashem Nechaz Yafa. The fire of Hashem does not grasp properly. B'Sheira b'Nefesh Ha'adam, and rest and the Nefesh Ha'adam. Be'echad me'Gimel Dvar Meilu, and one of these three fuels, Torah Aveda Gemilas Chassadim, it's only when the fuel, meaning the Torah Aveda Gemilas Chassadim, becomes consumed in godliness. What does it mean, consumed? Bittul. Bittul means I don't exist, and consumed within you. It's only when the fuel, the Torah is with bittul, kleisa nefesh, elov, kiruach, aiser ruach, v'am, because one ruach draws and brings another ruach. So the Rebbe is explaining, it's not enough just to have a fuel. But just like it says, Hashem Elokecha Eish Eichluhu, there has to be this consuming fire, the goods need to be consumed. The same thing, the person who's doing Torah Aveda Gemilas Chassadim, the Torah Aveda Gemilas has to be done in a way that's becoming consumed, which is the level of bittul. Therefore, the Amshach of Hashem is dependent on Torah mitzvahs of the Yid, meaning, like the pasuk says, "Vayokom Eidas BeYaakov." He got up the testimony of Yaakov, son of Yisrael. Ki Yaakov and Yisrael, these two levels of Yaakov and Yisrael. The pasuk says like this: Vayakam Eidos b'Yaakov. He established testimonials, which means mitzvahs for Yaakov. V'kam shevet mi Yisrael. V'seir Sham b'Yisrael. So the pasuk is speaking about Torah mitzvahs using both names, Yaakov and Yisrael. So the Rebbe is explaining, Yaakov and Yisrael represent breaking evil, which is Yaakov, and transforming evil, which is Yisrael. In other words, is Skafye breaking evil, meaning I don't do what I want to do, I want to do evil. I don't want to do what I want to do. I break myself. And Ishapcha is also transforming evil to Kedusha. So he says, Shezeh Tolui. Hamshachas Erdavayde Torah mitzvahs, it has to be the level of Yaakov Yisrael, which is Iskafya, V'Sapcha, breaking evil, transforming evil. These are the two levels. That is the level of bittul. Masha'en came below bittul ratzein, without the bittul of the ratzon to Hashem, ein yecheles lahamshich. You can't bring down this level of kedusha. In other words, if a person is learning for ego, a person is doing mitzvahs for ego, shalei lishma, it's not bittul, and therefore that learning and those mitzvahs will not bring the kedusha down. It just won't bring the Kedusha down. And he says, Gimel Dvarim Elu. So these three things, even though it's dealing with physical objects, physical mitzvahs, physical learning, but therefore it says like this, how can you bring down this great level of Elokus, right, that keeps Hashem sustaining the world if it's dealing with Gashmistic things? So he says, that's what the pasuk says, Ani keverei shiranon. I'm like a slingshot. A slingshot. Pirish, Bereish, what did keverei shiranon? Bereish is Eres dak, a very thin piece of Eres tree. You can bend it down. In other words, it's a soft piece of wood, a very thin piece of wood that you can bend all the way down. Then when it goes back to where it was, it like shoots up. Okay? Bottom line, he's explaining a slingshot. What is a slingshot? You bend it all the way down, and then when you let go, it flies very high. So l'cheira, if you think about it, how is bringing it back low can make something fly high? It's a stira. Low and high are contradictory. I'm bringing it all the way down, and then it goes all the way up. What's it? So he says that's what Elokus is. Kach Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hashem says, Ani hu shenislabish b'maisa tachtenim. Kivrei shranon, Hashem says, I am the one bending myself down to the Yid in the physical objects. Aydei kfif es keimasi kaviyach. Through Hashem kaviyach lowering himself, shaydei zat tisal nefesh adam. Through this, the nefesh of the person will be elevated. Be'ilui achad ilui, elevation after elevation. The or be'er ein tzah baruch hu, to the revelation of Allah Hashem. V'hoyse nafshi tzrura b'tzrura chayim es Hashem mamish. That it brings it back to where it was before the neshama came into the body. The neshama was in the loftiest of places. And after with the neshama coming down, you read the Tzerach Aliyah, so it comes down and then it flies higher than it was before. Okay, so this is the level of fire of Kedusha. So the Alter Rebbe is explaining like this. You have Elokus is fire. Fire needs fuel. You have different fuels. Candles, torches, wood, whatever it is. In order for this fire to function, it needs to have bittul. It has to be consumed. And then the fire is consuming in a way that even though it's all the way down here, it goes all the way up. This is in Kedusha. Now the Alter Rebbe says there's a fire of evil also. Zelu mazeh. Everything in Kedusha exists in evil. He says, V'inei zelu mazeh asalakim. There's Eish Zara, a foreign fire, Keneged Eishechla, the opposite of a consuming fire of Kedusha. And this also is Machshava Dibur Amaisa, the fuel. Just like Machshava Dibur Amaisa is the fuel of Kedusha, what's the fuel of the evil fire? Thought, speech, and evil thought, speech, and action of evil. Machshava Dibur Amaisa Shelei Lahavaya Hema, Pchinas Klein Umis Kovid, which is disgrace, which is the opposite of Kovid. In Kedusha, Machshava Dibur Amaisa Kovid Elotayro, so that's the level of Kedusha. The level of embarrassment, being insulted, that's the level of Machshava Dibur Amaisa of Klipa. So like it says, Kved Chachamim Yincholu. Chachamim will inherit Kovid, Uchsilim, and fools, made him Kolin, will elevate the embarrassment, insulting. Kshem Shala Teva Tisala Nafshi Mi'et. And just like through the fire of Kedusha, the Nefesh becomes elevated b'yasa seis, much greater than the Nefesh could handle. The way it was through the B'tzur HaChaim Es Hashem Mamish, the way it was in Gan Eden, even higher. Kach lu'um ezeh al hara. The same thing in evil. Nemer ves nefesh eivech yikla'en b'teich kafa kela. The souls of the enemies, meaning the evil will be grasped in the kafa kela, in the level of evil. Hainu clear lemachdim merachik ma'ed ma'ed. They'll be thrown, just like a slingshot throws you up in Kedusha. This is a slingshot downwards. It throws you all the way, very far away from Hashem. Like it says, Anechi hastir astir pone bayemo al kolora. Not only one hester, astir pone. So in other words, Alter Rebbe is explaining, there's a fire. There could be a fire of Kedusha, and it could be a fire of evil. These fires, both of them need fuel. The fuel of Kedusha is the Aveda of the fuel of evil is thought, speech, and action of evil. Just like in Kedusha, the slingshot flies high, this flies very, very far. So there's two extremes. Okay, so how do you get rid of this foreign fire? It gets us all the way down to go all the way back. And when I say it's tshuva, it's to do tshuva. Especially because this is the maimer, don't forget, level of tshuva. But Frata says he made tshuva. Especially in the time of Aseret, the Rambam says, Azazman beisel chol chayfetz, whoever wants, Yeshiva melamakerim, to bring him back to the source, his soul will be crying out, b'mridus, in bitterness, Arichul kimer apnei Hashem, from the distance of Hashem, v'yoshuv al Hashem, v'rechameu, and he'll return to Hashem and have achmanis on him, like it said, v'yizak al ataber el Hashem b'tzalem. We mentioned many times, there's an interesting story, a Chassidus of Alter Rebbe. His son went off Yiddishkeit, but he went really far off Yiddishkeit. So the father came to the Alter Rebbe and said, what should I do with him? So the Alter Rebbe said, get him to come to me. So he got the son. He wasn't from, but a chassid he was. You know what I mean? The Alter Rebbe wanted him. He came. He had respect for the Alter Rebbe. So he comes to the Alter Rebbe, and the Alter Rebbe says to him, I understand. Okay, you try out to understand, but so much, so far you have to go. So he's a smart kid. He says, Rebbe, I'll give you an example. There's a horse. You have a slow horse and a fast horse. So when they get lost, a fast horse gets more lost than the slow horse because it's going faster in the wrong direction. So he says, Rebbe, I'm a fast horse. He asked me, I went so far because I'm a fast horse. I went all the way. Now, the Rebbe, but the difference is when they realize they made a mistake and they come back, so the fast horse comes back quicker than the slow horse. He told him, do tshuva. Okay, he did tshuva. He came back. Because the Rebbe explained to him that the fast horse can come tshuva. That's what he said. If you're all the way thrown in the opposite end, all you got to do is turn around. You say, Machdu ayi, make a U, and then you come back. He must have. Well, in those days, everybody rode a horse. How do you think he got around? They didn't have Teslas in those days.
Horse is much better.
Because you don't have to press so many buttons. What is the primary level of tshuva? Like it says, Elech Hashem nafshi esa. To you Hashem, nafshi esa, will elevate my soul. Levatu l'tzeinei elav yizbarich. Ta'bitul ta'Hashem. That you should only have one will to do what Hashem wants. B'tshuk of a place of nefesh mamish with the longing, and a longing of the soul of vakish mulfanav to ask Hashem. Sheyishra of that Hashem should rest his rotzen on him. Liyasei bittul v'rotzen. So in other words, like this level of tshuva, that's the level of bittul. And again, like you said before, the bittul is what makes the fire consumed. And if it makes the fire consumed, that's what causes the Oravaya to rest. But that take no blame about cautious slach lanu. Mechal lanu. This is what we say to Hashem. Slach lanu, mechal lanu. Different levels of slicha mechila depends on the sin. She'ein ekepshutei. It doesn't mean simply Kim Chatas Matifo by Manyan Mechila. Mechila means I did something wrong to you. I have to ask forgiveness. If I didn't do anything wrong to you, I don't have to ask forgiveness. So he says, Chazal tell us, Im Chatas Matifo by. If you sin, you think you did anything. Im Chatas Vrabo B'Shach, you do an abundance of sheer worse sins. Matifo by, you did anything. You didn't do anything. You couldn't care less. It's like a bug on the other end of the world does something bad in the other end of the world that you don't like, you know. So l'chayra, what's the inyan of mechila? Mechila means he did something wrong to me and you're asking me mechila. But by Hashem, what's mean mechila? We didn't do anything wrong to him. We couldn't care less. So the answer is inyan. Levakesh mechila. What are we asking mechila? Not that we did something wrong. We're asking forgiveness, meaning as follows. That I realized I did something wrong. Not I did anything to Hashem. I didn't do anything to Hashem. But I did something wrong in my world against Hashem. And therefore I want I want Hashem's will to come back. In other words, because I drove out Hashem's will because there's no bittul, like he says, and became a slingshot for evil. So I'm asking mechila, again, not that chas v'shalom, but because I stopped this level of elukus coming upon me, I'm asking Hashem, from my perspective, I'm sorry, and therefore we reveal this order.